If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Downfall Network for more cool content.
What's up, everybody? Thralls of Metal here. I am Jammin Jon, bringing you the next installment of What's Jon Jammin. This will be my fourth rendezvous with this subject. So, as you know, I go through usually 10 bands, mostly unsigned bands that aren't really out there at all, and this is my chance to put them out there. So I made the call on Instagram and said, hey, whoever wants to show up here, I'll review your band. And I have at least 8 bands that came to me through Instagram and 2 that I found on my own accord. And here they are. The first band, Geo Stigma, with the album The Die is Cast. These guys are a 5-piece band hailing from France. This is their first EP, came out in 2018, and it is released under their own volition, on their own accord, no label. I've jammed this EP probably 10, 12 times now, and it's everything that I love about technical death metal. Big, huge, chuggy guitars, hooks, technical noodling, blast beats, polyrhythms. It's got some stellar production. The guitars remind me a lot of the guitars found on the Faceless's album Planetary Duality. Just that big, meaty, rich, almost wet tone, so to speak. Does a great job on the lows and the highs. I was just really reminded of Gorod and Hate Eternal, just as far as the overall feeling of the album. The end song, Withering Breath, is pretty sick. The breakdown in that song just really hits home. So, again, please check these guys out. They have a full-length coming that's been thwarted by COVID, but I know a lot of bands are having that problem right now. So keep your eyes peeled for Geostygma. Next in line is Bleak Flesh with their album And Save Us From Silence. This is a 3-piece band hailing from Santiago, Chile, formed in 2013. This is their 4th release. Came out in 2019, although they did have this album re-released in January of 2020 as an instrumental. And I'll get more into that here in a minute. One of the notable features about this band, in fact, something that the band made sure to bring to my attention, and when they gave me their PR kit, that the drummer is none other than Lord Marco Pizzarella, as you know from Brain Drill and a small collection of other death metal bands. He's most known for his speed and his unwavering speedy gravity blast that really angers me because I don't know how you do that. Anyway, vocally, it ranges anywhere from death growls to a high-pitched scream, probably something comparative to, say, the higher-pitched screams in Black Dahlia Murder. This album is classified as a symphonic, blackened, progressive, melodic death metal album. Again, that's a mouthful, but it's a trip listening to all these songs, and they have a couple fairly lengthy songs, which is cool. I guess the most straightforward way to put this would be is if Decrepit Birth and Obscura had a symphony behind them. I mean, you talk about the brutality of Decrepit Birth and their own melodic feel, and then you just talk about the craziness that is Obscura. I mean, just all over the place, and these songs are all over the place, and the soundscape is lush and ambient. There's always something going on. These guys don't really slow down. Now, in the beginning I said that this album was re-released as an instrumental, and normally I'm a big fan of instrumental recordings because they really give you an opportunity to hone in on the instrumentation, and it's not blocked by the vocals. Like in the song In Motion Emptiness, that's when I was really able to hear the guitar tone. That's where I got the Decrepit Birth reference from. Just the heavy brutality, that giant guitar tone that they have. It reminded me a lot of that, and so it was cool to hear the individual instrumentation parts, because they're really musically talented, but the vocals in this case, I think, add more of a dynamic, which definitely is taken away in the instrumental version. Like, those vocals definitely play a part to each of the movements of the album, so although it's released as an instrumental, I definitely recommend with vocals. Next one in line was a rather fun listen. Cryptic Shift with their album Visitations from Enceladus. Enceladus? Who knows? I don't really know how to pronounce it, but that didn't make it a bad record. They are a 4-piece band hailing from Leeds, UK. While I would classify this as atmospheric death metal, the band's actual classification was phenomenal technological astro death. Now, again, when I talked to these guys, they greeted me with, I believe it was greetings from the cosmos, and then when they exited the conversation, they said, have an interstellar day. So, if you haven't guessed, lyrically the content would be that of sci-fi and interstellar travel. In fact, each one of the songs tells a different trip about a guy careening through space, doing space battles, or space work. I'm not real sure. This is their third release on Blood Harvest Records. It's classified as an EP due to the fact it has 4 songs, but the first song, Moonbelt Immolator, rings in at 25 minutes and 57 seconds. Now, normally a song weighing in around 26 minutes would have a bunch of filler in it, or maybe some ambience, or since they're on space, it could be a guy kicking a Martian in the nuts. I'm not real sure, but the songs in this case never left me bored. I never lost track of anything in this album. If anything, for a 25-minute jam, it was probably one of the most entertaining 25-minute jams I've ever had. The overall sound of this record is just wonderful ambient darkness. And behind every complex riff and drum beat, they do a really good job of filling in the space, making it very full and rich on the sound. Definitely this would be for fans of, at least I was reminded of, Ulcerate and Cynic, and of course Gorguts, and then Abriosus. That's another band to check out if you've never heard them. But all of those bands, I think, thrive on this really dark, dissonant, ambient sound. Cryptic Shift is no slouch in this area. While I might have made some minor changes to the mix, it was just a great listen. I would definitely check these guys out. Next in line would be the band Hammer with their album Immortals. Now, this band Hammer was a little bit difficult to find. When searching for these guys, I would put in Hammer, Santa Clarita, California, as that's where they're from, because there is a Hammer band that's in the UK, there's one that's in Germany, there's one that's in France, there's one in another part of the US. When you type in Hammer, it's going to bring up a myriad of hammers. Hammers in the evening, hammers at night, hammers, hammers, hammers. There's even an MC Hammer. As you know, he was too legit to quit. And there is no quit in the band Hammer. This is their first release, released on their own accord. Came out in April of 2020. It's a full-length release, which is really cool because I don't typically get full-length releases from bands. Normally I just get EPs or a couple songs here and there. This album is classified as thrash metal, and these guys are no slouch in that department, although I would call it a little bit more thrash death metal. Sounds like it was recorded somewhere between the late 80s and the early 90s. Most notably, the sound they went after was death. Sounds like from the Scream Bloody Gore era, or Leprosy, or Spiritual Healing. As you know, all great albums by Death. The vocals are spot on Chuck. It was hard to really compare him to anything else. From there, it's just got a sound of that kind of early 90s thrash. I got Megadeth out of the deal, and Slayer. The title track on this album, Immortals, as well as the song Rolling Thunder. Those are riff farms. Riff after riff after riff. I would like to see a little bit more lead work incorporated, being as it is thrash. Well, I totally get where they're coming from. Definitely check out those 2 songs and give Hammer a listen. Once again, type in Hammer from Santa Clarita or you're never going to find it. Next in line is the band Trow with their album Monochromacy. Yet another 3-piece band hailing from Portland, Oregon, and God in heaven do I love the Portland, Oregon scene as far as metal and death and doom are concerned. Just always great stuff coming out of Portland, because I don't know if it's the weather in Portland or what, but get a lot of pissed off bands from Portland, Oregon. This album was released independently, again, by the band. Came out in March of 2019. There is a demo before this album, and all I could find on Bandcamp was the fact that it was called Demo. Classified as atmospheric death metal, I was reminded of both Wolves in the Throne Room and Enslaved. And so if you're fans of either of those bands, and you should be because they're awesome, you're definitely going to be a fan of Trow. It had several longer songs on the album, which is really cool. And again, if you're going to write long songs, make sure they don't lose attention, and this didn't lose my attention at all. I will state that the guitars are really out front in this album, which is fine. They just happen to lose some of the other instrumentation in the mix. Like the kick drum is kind of lost when the tremolo kicks in a lot of these songs. Again, that's a minor adjustment I would make. It's not a giant complaint because the record sounded pretty awesome. The song Black Jammer and the song A Familiar Poison were both my two takes. Again, great riffs. The ambience and the dissonance were really great in these songs as well. I wouldn't state so much hooks as it really is kind of more of an atmospheric tremolo thing, but you'll understand when you hear them. They're the greater songs that have melody in them. In fact, I got reminded a lot of early Mastodon when they first kicked in, so definitely give Trow a shout out. Next in line would be the band Victimario. You heard me right, Victimario, but all one word, Victimario, with their album Within. These guys are again a 4-piece death metal band hailing from Argentina. This is their second full-length release, released in April 2020, again on their own accord. A lot of these independent releases sound pretty awesome, so you guys are definitely doing a good job in the mixing room. It's a concept album, actually, about the inner workings of the mind from both the perspective of a victim and then a victimizer in dealing with various types of sexual crimes. The first half of the album, the first 5 songs, come from the opinion of the victim, and they are notably a little bit heavier and a little bit angrier, whereas the remaining 5 songs on the album come from the point of the victimizer, and they are just a lot more darkened. Think Ingested on the vocals meets Abysmal Dawn and Aborted on the song structure. If you're a fan of any of those damn bands, then you're in the right market. I'm definitely a fan of those bands. You should be a fan of those bands. And consequently a fan of Victimario. Chugs and riffs and hooks all day. There are a couple of notable leads, but really it's about chug chug. Chug chug chug. I would definitely recommend this album. The songs Aftermath and Paraphilia were the 2 ones I took away, so check out those and the rest of the album because it kicks ass. Next in line is the Cassandra Dilemma with the album 3. Now again, this is Roman numeral 3 and not the number 3. May make a difference when you're looking for it. I don't know. It's a one-man band hailing from Ontario, Canada. All 5 songs on this EP are absolutely pummeling. Came out in February of 2020. I talked to this guy online today a little bit because I wanted to make sure that it was all him, and it is in fact all him. The vocals, the guitars, the bass. The only thing that's not him is a programmed drum machine, but unless you're really, really a fan of drums on an album and are trained to listen to the small nuances that would make them programmed, you'd never know the difference. Definitely some melodic deathcore, but it has this really cool, eerie soundscape behind it. I can't tell if it's all synths or if he's doing some guitar effects, but there's just this really eerie sound that kind of breaks through on every track. It's a really good background noise, especially if you're going to be a one-man band and you want to create filler or you want to create a bigger, larger soundscape. It's cool to have something like that. And he was no slouch in this area. If you get a chance to go to this guy's Instagram, he's got pictures of his guitars. They're 8-string Ibanez guitars. They're absolutely beautiful. This is what you would think that a EP written by a one-man on an 8-string guitar would sound like. For fans of Xenobiotic, Viscera, perhaps even a little bit of Fit for an Autopsy. The song Soul, S-O-L-E, Soul, is pretty cool. The chug that's in that song, the riff that's in the verse, and the breakdown are really killer. Again, it's only 5 songs, though. Definitely listen to all of them, and definitely check out the Cassandra Dilemma. Props to this guy for making all this sound as one man. Next in line is the band Puncture Wound, and the title of this album, I even talked to these guys, and I said, damn it, I said, reading this title on the air is going to be fun. There's no way. Puncture Wound with their album Complete Carnage of Coagulating Cacophonous Corpses. Holy shit, I said it. I'm surprised I said that as well as I said it the first time, because when I practiced it over here in the car, it sounded nothing like that. Hailing from Queensland, Australia, this is the band's first full-length release. Now, I read in a couple spots that it was self-released, and then I read in another spot, I believe it was on the band's Facebook page, where they're on 1054 Records. So whether or not it was self-released, they are currently on 1054 Records. If the title explains anything, it would be that this band is fairly chaotic. I will, however, state that when Nick and I first jammed this, back when they first sent it to me, it's really just straightforward death metal, which is really cool, because I really like, as much as I like tech death, as much as I like brutal death metal, this is just straightforward, kick you in the balls death metal. Chuggy riffs, blast beats, even a polyrhythm here or there. For the most part, though, just really straightforward. It's like jamming Evangelic and Cannibal Corpse. The songs are Occasional Butchering. I love these titles. The songs Occasional Butchering and Inflicting Horror were two of the ones I took away, just because those songs are nasty through and through. Definitely give Puncture Wound a look up, and if you can make it through the album title of Complete Carnage of Coagulating Cacophonous Corpses, if you can make it through that album title, then you should jam the rest of the album. Alrighty, the next band, Cynicism. I actually found Cynicism as I was rolling through one of the Maryland Death Fest forum pages. As you know, Nick and I were supposed to go to Death Fest this year, but like everything, it's canceled. I'll explain more in depth about how I found this band, but as of right now, they only have 2 tracks out. One called Abracadaver, which is clever, and one called World of Filth. They do have a record that's supposed to be released on July the 3rd. Again, this is on their own accord as well. This album is very well done. And when I say album, I mean these 2 songs are very well done. The album coming out on July 3rd will be Limb Hymns. Easy to use, fun to say. Hailing from Boston, Massachusetts, the band has a definite affinity for Aborted and Carcass, and Exhumed, and a little bit of Suffocation. Actually, when I talked to their guitarist, Matt Odette, we talked for several hours, actually, when I got in touch with him and talked about, bands we had seen, experiences we had, so it was a cool, little personal thing. But when I talked to him, he said, right off the bat, when I told him who they sounded like, he was like, man, you nailed it. He was like, you nailed pretty much everything. So, again, if you like any of the bands I mentioned, you're going to love Cynicism. And I'm really excited to hear what comes out as a full-length from these guys. Being as I'm such a fan of all their influences, I just can't wait to see where it goes. So, definitely check out Cynicism. Last but not least, this is a band I found on my own accord, tooling through Spotify at random. This is the band Cabal. Now, the best way to look these guys up on Spotify, if you're going to do it, is Cabal, but it's all in uppercase letters. Apparently that makes a difference. I don't know why. The album is titled Drag Me Down. This is a 5-piece deathcore band. Now, let me make a disclaimer. I don't get into a whole lot of deathcore anymore. Once I found out about the wonderful world of death metal, I hit the ground running and didn't really turn back. So to be a deathcore band nowadays, you have to really bring something awesome to the table for me to really fully get into it. These guys are no slouch. This is their second release on Long Branch Records, released again in 2020. It didn't give me an exact date. This is pretty much everything that I love about deathcore. And in this case, there wasn't a whole lot of melody going on so much as it was just these massive, nasty, chugging guitars, like the guitar tone you'd find in Periphery's breakdowns or Humanity's Last Breath. In fact, this is what I thought Humanity's Last Breath's last album should have sounded like, where it's riff after riff after riff. But in this case, Cabal did it, not only riff after riff after riff, but they transitioned it well, and they made it not just into a collection of random things. They let the riffs ride out a little bit longer and groove, so you really, really got into them before they switched to another almost like breakdownish set of riffs. And although there are some synths in this album, and they do a somewhat okay job of filling in the holes as far as the sound is concerned. You know, while it kind of alluded to maybe like an early Born of Osiris feel, they really weren't heavy on the synths, and they were more just all about the breakdowns. Take every nasty breakdown from any of the Acacia Strain's work and just put it into these songs. The songs Tongues and Unbound are probably my two favorites from this album. It really kicked ass. This was a good find for me, so... That closes out my 10 albums for What's Jon Jammin. The last thing I would like to bring up, I don't normally do this, but the way I found Cynicism initially was through their guitarist Matt Odette, who runs a charity called Headbang for Hunger. Now, this is directly related to the charity Feeding America, where, 200 food banks across the nation get together and feed the hungry. But in this case, Matt has offered up some additional content for when you make a donation. Matt used to run or be part of a radio station that was in Boston called Nasty Habits. It was an underground production that ran from roughly 1984 to 2005, and during the time that he was on Nasty Habits, he got some really cool interview material. He ended up with a lot of behind-the-scenes interviews. So when you donate through Headbangers for Hunger, you get one of these interviews or a live bootleg set from... I think when I found him, it was a live bootleg set from the Red Chord, and of course the guys on the Red Chord gave him, full permission to do this. I'm going to include a link here in the video so you can check it out, as well as links from all the other bands. So, once again, if you like what you saw, please hit subscribe and like. I try to do this as much as humanly possible, being as I've been to work this whole time during Corona. My time's a little bit iffy, but I will definitely get to you eventually. Once again, too, as you know, we have an Instagram page, and if you come to Instagram and you say, hey, I have a band, please, for the love of God, send me something about your band, too. I had another band send me just a random song, and that was it. And when I reached back out, nobody responded. So, a couple of the bands that I've reviewed have PR kits. I would recommend either a PR kit or make sure that when you link me in, link me to something that has something about your band. It just makes it easier for me not to have to hunt through miles and miles of stuff which may or may not be useful to you. The point is to make this as useful for you as humanly possible, because I definitely want to get you out there. So, you guys take care.